I used to believe that if something unfair happened at work, there would always be a system in place to fix it. I was wrong. A few years ago, I worked in a retail shop inside a busy shopping mall. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills, and at the time I needed stability. I was in my mid-20s, trying to build my life, saving what I could, and figuring out what direction I wanted to go in. That's when my former boss entered the picture. At first, he seemed ordinary. Confident, maybe a little too relaxed with boundaries, but in retail you get used to different personalities. I tried to stay professional. I showed up on time, did my work, avoided drama. That was my strategy everywhere: keep your head down, do your job, go home. But over time, things shifted. His comments started becoming personal. Not openly inappropriate, just enough to make me uncomfortable. Questions about my dating life. Remarks about my appearance disguised as compliments. Standing a little too close. Lingering conversations after shifts when everyone else had already left. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just awkward management style. You tell yourself these things because it's easier than accepting what's really happening. Eventually, the behavior crossed the line. I won't go into details, I don't need to. What matters is this: he violated my trust and my sense of safety. It was not mutual. It was not welcome. And it changed the way I felt walking into work every single day. I decided to report it. That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Anyone who has ever tried to file a complaint against someone in power knows the internal battle. What if they don't believe me? What if I lose my job? What if it somehow becomes my fault? But I filed the case anyway. There was an investigation. There were meetings. There were polite emails from the main office thanking me for bringing concerns forward. There were assurances that the situation would be looked into thoroughly. And then, weeks later, I received the result. There would be no major consequences. No termination. No suspension. No public acknowledgement. Instead, I was offered a solution. If I didn't feel comfortable working with him anymore, I could transfer to another location, in another town. 60 kilometers away. The message was clear, even if no one said it out loud: if you're uncomfortable, you can leave. He would stay. I remember sitting in my car after that meeting, staring at the steering wheel, feeling this mix of anger and disbelief. I had done everything right. I had reported it the proper way. I had cooperated fully. And yet, somehow, I was the one being asked to relocate my life. I didn't transfer. Not because I was brave. Not because I had some master plan. I stayed because I needed the income, and I didn't want him to push me out of a job I had earned. But something changed in me after that. I stopped believing the system would protect me. And I started paying attention. You see, when something like that happens, your instincts sharpen. You observe more. You notice patterns. You see the way someone moves, who they talk to, how they react when certain topics come up. The shop was inside a large mall, and I had been working there long enough to know people from other stores. Security guards. Cafe staff. Managers from nearby shops. Word travels fast in places like that. My situation wasn't a secret. I didn't publicly announce it, but people talk. And when it later became known that he had been behaving inappropriately toward another employee, someone who had just turned 18, more eyes started watching him. This time, people weren't brushing it off. Mall environments are interesting ecosystems. There's official authority, and then there's unofficial oversight, the collective awareness of dozens of workers who see more than management ever does. And slowly, I started hearing things. Whispers about late-night meetings. About strange visitors. About him stepping outside frequently during shifts for quick conversations. About deliveries that didn't match inventory. I didn't know specifics. I didn't need to. But my intuition told me something wasn't right. I never plotted revenge. I never tried to trap him. I didn't set anything up. What I did was much simpler. I stopped protecting him. Before, if customers complained about him being absent, I covered. If he made scheduling mistakes, I fixed them quietly. If someone asked where he was, I made excuses. After the investigation failed me, I stopped doing that. If he was late, I said he was late. If paperwork was incomplete, I documented it. If someone from another store mentioned suspicious behavior, I listened, and I didn't dismiss it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet. But accountability often starts quietly. Months passed. 5 months, to be exact. During that time, the tension in the shop was strange. He seemed more paranoid. More distracted. He snapped at small things. Double-checked doors. Took phone calls in hushed tones outside the building. I remember thinking, whatever you're involved in, it's catching up to you. And one morning, it did. I came into work and immediately felt something was off. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked near the service entrance. A couple of people in formal jackets were speaking with mall security. By noon, the news had spread. He had been arrested. Not for workplace misconduct. Not for harassment. For drug distribution. On a large scale. I won't pretend I knew the details beforehand. I didn't. But when the information surfaced, it explained everything: the strange visitors, the outside meetings, the sudden paranoia. He wasn't just bending rules. He was breaking laws. And this time, it wasn't an internal HR discussion. It was criminal. The company had no choice. He was terminated immediately. I remember sitting in the break room, scrolling through messages from coworkers in other stores. Some shocked. Some not surprised at all. And what I felt wasn't joy. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was relief. Relief that I hadn't imagined his instability. Relief that he could no longer control the environment I had felt trapped in. Relief that, eventually, truth surfaced, even if not in the way I expected. The system that failed to protect me had accidentally protected itself. Once his actions became a legal liability, action was immediate. That's what struck me the most. When it was about my safety, it was negotiable. When it became about corporate risk, it was decisive. The day after the arrest became official news, I resigned. People were surprised. "Why quit now?" one coworker asked. "He's gone." But here's the thing, I had only stayed to see the outcome. Not out of obsession. Not out of revenge fantasy. Out of closure. I needed to witness the moment accountability arrived, even if it came from a direction I never anticipated. Once it did, I didn't need that place anymore. Staying would have meant pretending the previous months hadn't happened. Pretending I trusted the management who had suggested I uproot my life instead of addressing misconduct. I handed in my notice calmly. No dramatic speech. No confrontation. No victory monologue. Just a quiet exit. Looking back, people sometimes call this a revenge story. But I don't see it that way. Revenge implies planning someone's downfall. I didn't plan his. He built it himself. What I did was survive, observe, and refuse to be silent when patterns became visible. And maybe that's the part that matters. Not explosive revenge. Not dramatic payback. Just patience. Because sometimes, when someone operates recklessly long enough, they eventually create their own consequences. And when they do, you don't need to push. You just need to step aside and let gravity do its work. I learned 3 things from that experience. First, if a system fails you, it doesn't mean you were wrong to speak up. Second, people who ignore boundaries in one area of life often ignore them in others. And third, closure doesn't always look the way you expect. I thought justice would come from HR. It didn't. It came from somewhere else entirely. Would I have preferred a world where my complaint alone was enough? Absolutely. But life doesn't always move in straight lines. Sometimes it circles. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes, 5 months later, it knocks on the door in a way no one can ignore. When I quit the day after the news broke, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. Not because he was in prison. But because I no longer carried the weight of wondering whether he would ever face consequences. He did. And I moved on. That was my real victory. Not his downfall. My freedom.